thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays through Zoom.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Yeah. Thank you for the invite. My name is Charmaine, and my purpose is to reimagine cities through the use of technology. I'm doing it in multiple ways right now. One is I'm the director of innovation strategy for Open Door Legal. What that essentially means is I set the product vision, lead and innovate change management strategies and organizational design for a nonprofit that is hoping to provide universal access to legal representation to dramatically solve poverty in San Francisco. And then after San Francisco, we hope to build a nationwide model to reduce poverty through the lens of legal services, because
Hmm.
we believe it's right for everyone to be able to understand their own legal privilege and decisions so that they can navigate against employment issues, issues in terms of housing, issues in terms of medical bills, et cetera. And we are building a general hospital model, kind of in line with universal healthcare, but instead it's universal legal representation.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, yeah, and then I'm also a co-founder in Web3, because when I think about systems, I think about traditional systems and the systems to come. And I'm working on a project called Neighbor. And Neighbor is the first utility NFT to distribute awards to solve affordable housing. The reason why I believe this is important today is because as a minimum wage worker in cities, you can't afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment in every county in America. And we also are seeing historical highs in terms of real estate prices, not just to buy them, but to rent them as well. And I want
Absolutely.
to create a new model that allows equitable distribution of wealth through the lens of real estate. Before I worked in the professional world, I learned a lot of my business skills and generational knowledge through my family.
Hmm.
At the time, my father was an engineer, my mom was a preschool teacher, and they were able to utilize their $50,000 a year income at the time to use the BRRRR method, which is to buy, renovate, and resell to then own 10 multifamily homes in LA County. And I know that
Fantastic.
it's impossible today. Yeah. And so
Oh, yeah.
utilize,
Buy one. Good luck.
yeah, good luck, right? Especially if you're making $50,000 a year um, with a combined income. And so I wanted to kind of utilize my skills in real estate and my passion for real estate and my love and passion for innovation, organizational design through the lens of DAOs to really build a new model of real estate because I do think it's pressing and needed at the time as well.
So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. It seems like a really intractable problem right now. I mean, I don't know how, or let's say it's very difficult problem because everyone when talks about homelessness and not being able to own homes and things like that, they seem to, it sounds very difficult. Is it really that difficult? Is there really that many big issues around it, or is it a lot more simple than people say?
Yeah, I actually think it's much more simpler. I think we're overly complexing things in regards to, why we have a current system in place. I mean, if we were just to create our own mental model, right? In the end of the day, it's a two-side market, right?
Hmm.
People want houses either to buy or rent, and people need to be able to build a supply, right? And what's creating the complexity is the in between.
Right.
And in between is creating different misaligned incentives. So if we think about the government, for instance, they are have revenue through the lens of property taxes. So the higher your costs in terms of your real estate, not only does that incentivize a future seller, but that also provides recurring revenue for the government because of
Right.
the property taxes, right? And then if you think about tourism, right, to be able to maintain cities, there also needs to be tourism. But cities as a whole, they think about short-term growth, but not necessarily long-term sustainability. And so
Hmm.
if we can kind of realign incentives and say, hey, we have two demographics that are entering cities. One is a digital nomad, and there's about 20 million digital nomads who became digital nomads since 2020 because of the changing landscape of work. And then secondly, the essential workers who are maintaining the infrastructure of cities. If we don't provide access for them to have a place to live without impacting their financial safety nets, they can no longer be able to work in these cities. And so from a workforce development standpoint, we're seeing the highest demand in jobs being either low skill labor or middle skill labor. And so how could we kind of incentivize these individuals to stay while also still growing tourism? And I think if we can create a new system in place that aligns those incentives, we can then pursue and solve this problem much faster as well, which is the reason why we decided to solve this in Web3, because in Web3, you can reimagine systems through the lens of collective ownership and collective membership. And so if there's a way in which we're creating an alignment between local residents, digital nomads, government partners, small businesses who are looking to hire essential workers or hourly workers, then we're creating a new system that can be evenly distributed.
Right, right. So what's the roadblock against creating new types of housing that could actually house people who have these lower incomes? Because I mean, it seems to me right now that there's certain limitations that zoning and other governmental regulations are saying, okay, you got to build like this. You can't build like that. I mean, I think there was a case of a council member actually put up a couple of illegal ADUs in his backyard and was told to tear them down, even though there were people living in them. I mean, how do we get over those things?
Yeah, and then I think a good example to kind of think about is the unions of today of Web 2, right? If we think about unions, their aligned incentive is mass decision making that benefits a large group of people, right? And for government partners, in the end of the day, their incentive is to provide goodwill and a positive environment that provides equitable and economic returns for the constituents that they represent, right? Right now, the problem is, and I think it's because of Web 2 systems, is there's not an easy way to transparently understand through more of a consensus decision-making framework, what do people want in the end of the day, right? And because for traditional cities and traditional government partners, the largest voice is typically those who have the largest pockets. It's very difficult for them to really understand what does everyone want in these cities, which is the reason why we decided to build this in Web3, because we can utilize a decentralized autonomous organization, which essentially is a new type of inclusive institution where votes, if built through that business model, can be distributed equitably. It gives us the ability of understanding what do local residents want, what do tourists want, and how is that aligned to government or neighborhood policies. And we already are seeing this in Web 2. I used to live in a neighborhood in Oakland, in the Temescal district, and they had a business improvement district that connected government partners, small businesses, and citizens together. When I lived in Temescal 5 years ago, there was just a little bit of foot traffic. It was not safe to live in. 5 years later, it's one of the most safest, highly foot trafficked areas in Oakland. And I think it was because they were able to utilize a new type of system that connected various stakeholders together. And so if we can understand, what is the top line value for these government officials, it's recurring revenue, and it's also a connection to their constituents that doesn't create a barrier of reach or the inability of utilizing technology that bottlenecks kind of their bottom line in the end of the day. And so by creating a new system that gives them more transparency, that also gives them collective membership, will also gives them higher ratings. So if they want to be reelected, they have that backing data to be reelected. It then gives them the ability of saying yes. And that's what we've seen, in multiple models in the neighborhood that, we're hoping to build in Massachusetts, is government partners actually want to solve this problem, but they also want to ensure that by solving this problem, it's incentivized to their future plans.
So you're saying that this model is actually available today outside of Web3. So what makes it better in the Web3 in the Web3 model?
Yeah, I think what's really great about Web3 and just kind of utilizing kind of, innovation frameworks in place is it's kind of that next stage of the agile development process. And so if you kind of look at the Agile Manifesto, the principles that are in place is to experiment and to continually disrisk your assumptions. But a lot of that is kind of built in its own vacuum, right? Where you're working with, if you're a product manager, you're working with engineers and designers, and you're kind of leaning towards kind of UX research to then, de-risk your assumptions as you continue to build your features. What's unique about Web3 is it's driven by a network first. So it's really about pre-idea building, which I think is very different than the Web 2 landscape, where it's about, hey, we have this idea, and instead of us building a product and testing our assumptions to then raise money, we're just going to share the idea, and we're going to use this proposal process to build with a community. And that's why we've seen, with Bored Apes or Doodles or other kind of Web3 NFT projects, because they've built with their community, they were able to kind of accelerate adoption and scale much faster than any other software company. Bored Apes, I think it was April of last year when Bored Apes, was built in their community. Now they're over $1 billion in terms of worth, right? And so I think what's really interesting about the Web3 world is it's hyper focusing on the next framework of consumerism, which is built on the creator economy. And so I think if we're thinking about this in terms of traditional systems, what does it look like for each individual of a neighborhood to be a creator, add input, add proposals, share ideas, and have the community vote? And how does that collectively shift the ways in which we are able to kind of coordinate and live in cities as a whole?
Yeah, I love the way you said that about Agile, because if you ask me, it's kind of a way of life. It doesn't just apply to product management or project management. It's something that can be used in anyone's lives, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's that flexible. So if you must come across people who are like have no knowledge whatsoever Web3 and the technologies involved. How would you explain it to them? How do you explain it to them?
Yeah, so I explain it to my nephews as and my youngest nephew, he's about 10 years old, and the way that I kind of define Web3 for him is it's essentially a way for you to own a piece of an idea, and for you to be in part of that idea. So he loves to play Minecraft. And
what 10-year-old doesn't love Minecraft?
It's either Minecraft or it's Fortnite, right? And
yeah,
so,
exactly. I think I played Fortnite. It took me about 30 seconds to die in Fortnite. I'm like, okay, I can't play this.
And in Minecraft, you're essentially building civilizations, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're building cities, right? And what's really great about it is you're able to really see end to end your impact in building that game, right? And then you're incentivized to also optimize and innovate that game as well. And so what it does is it actually innovates on both sides. One is if you're the game developer of Minecraft and you're utilizing Web3 technology, is instead of waiting until 1 million people have tested it before you do your user research, you can learn in real time, and the users who love to play the game can be incentivized through a tokenized economy to earn by helping to innovate a game, right? And they are also known within the community as creators who've helped to implement the game. I think another example, which is it's more Web2, but I think they have a Web3 mindset, is TikTok. And so if you kind of look at TikTok, have you ever seen a music video or a song that was created with TikTok, and then suddenly you see a duet of someone kind of adding on to that song, and then it becomes its own unique version, and you have hundreds of people, and then that hashtag becomes viral. I think with Web3, you're able to really amplify a network and create something that you are able to do without a mass group of people who are creating with you. And I think that's really unique, and each person is kind of creating their own ownership to creating that product, which I think is will kind of accelerate innovation in itself.
So you're saying, I mean, it's like that originally started with YouTube, where somebody would just post something and then they would share and they would add on to it. But are you saying with Web3 is that the ownership is spread out amongst the individuals? Is that right?
It's shared ownership, which I think is is incentivizing in the end of the day, because with shared ownership, you have the ability of amplifying a brand. Like, I'll give you another example. My family, they're from Long Beach, California.
Hmm.
And over the holidays, I went back to Long Beach, and I like to drive around and kind of look at new neighborhoods to see what has been changing in the neighborhood. And in a corner in downtown Long Beach, I saw a Bored Ape burger shop.
No way.
Yeah, a Bored Ape burger shop. And I think what's really great about Web3, right? And I think, again, it builds on the technologies that we've built in Web2, is now someone who owns a part of the brand can utilize the brand to build a new business,
Hmm.
right? And the royalties are still kind of laddering up to the Bored Ape organization, but the individual themselves can utilize the network effects from that brand to create their own businesses. And that's
Hmm.
why we've seen, Bored Ape small businesses. We've also seen individuals who own Bored Ape NFTs sell or loan their NFT during the Super Bowl commercials, or kind of share or loan it to existing celebrities, because it gives new economic opportunities by people being a part of a community. And I think that's really special about Web3, is you have the ability of co-owning in part of a vision. And because you are a member of a vision, you then have the ability of amplifying it to your own vertical, to
Right.
new economic prosperity for yourself.
So how does that translate to monetization then? So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways. I can kind of share you the way in which we're building it for Neighbor.
Hmm.
Again, Neighbor is the first utility NFT to solve affordable housing. And so how we're doing this is we're actually going to be buying multifamily homes in gentrifying neighborhoods. Our first pursuit in our Gen Zero collection is to focus on Zoom towns. And how we are kind of creating those new economic opportunities is we're creating a decentralized marketing team. So instead of our team marketing a lot of our short-term rentals that are going to be a part of this neighborhood, and so for us, we're connecting affordable housing, which is actually the definition of affordable housing based on the federal government, which
Hmm.
means that for our hourly workers, they'll be spending no more than 30% of their monthly income, because the government deems that affordable, but yet
Right.
don't have we have a shortage of affordable housing all over America.
Hmm.
And then we're connecting it to short-term rentals for digital nomads who, from our research, want to be a part of neighborhoods, want to build community, but also still want the flexibility. And with our holders, their unique opportunity in Web3 is promoting and being creators of the marketing for our neighborhoods. So by marketing, once a month, and we're giving them templates and they can utilize this in their social media, they get a percentage of our net profits. And so as we're building out our neighborhoods, it'll start off small, probably $30-$40 in our first neighborhood. But as we continue to grow our real estate portfolio and we have hundreds and thousands of properties, this will give them income that they can potentially replace with their full-time job, where
Mm.
they'll potentially have $3,000 to $10,000 a month, depending on the number of NFTs that they own within our collection, as long as they are opting in every month to be a part of our decentralized marketing team. And so for us, we're really leveraging network effects, because what we see is when you're booking an Airbnb and hotel, your first point of research isn't going on Google, isn't going on hotels.com. The way that consumers are kind of looking at products today is actually going on Instagram. It's going on TikTok, which is the reason
Hmm.
why TikTok is kind of imploding the whole supply chain right now, is because of the reach that they have through the lens of network effects. And so if we can utilize that in the lens of real estate, but also distributed rewards that are monetarily back to our community, that also gives them a way of building generational wealth without having to deal with the liabilities of owning a property.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. So let me go back to what you said before. Zoomtown. What's a Zoomtown? I think I
Yeah,
know, but like I want to hear you describe it.
I'm happy to kind of share our definition of it. And so As I said before, 20 million professionals have decided to become digital nomads since 2020. And that's because of the ever-changing kind of definition of work, right?
Mhm.
And so what's happening because of that is there's an emergence of Zoom Towns, which is built on the emergence of digital nomads who are working primarily on their computer and potentially utilizing Zoom as we are, or other video call platforms in their way of work. And because they have the flexibility of living everywhere, it's also giving them the capability of really asking themselves this question, which is, if I could kind of create the ideal environment for myself, where would I want to live? And
Mhm.
so what we're seeing with a large majority of digital nomads is they're going to Bozeman, Montana, they're going to Maine, they're going to Rhode Island. They really want to be closer to nature because nature, you know, helps with your mental health as well.
Absolutely. I'm surprised more people don't understand that.
Yeah. And so we
Take a
had
walk in the woods. You want to de-stress? Just walk in the woods.
walk in the woods, spend time around the lake, go to
That's
a
right.
national park, which is very interesting because we've also did our own due diligence in terms of Zoom towns. And what we realized is during an economic recession, the most resilient areas are those near national park because
Mm.
people are either going there for tourism or they're going there to buy their second or third home because they want to be closer to nature in times of mental stress and economic, turbulence. And so
Yeah.
kind of based on that, we kind of were thinking about, what does the future of cities look like, knowing that individuals are migrating to these areas and these Zoom towns like Bozeman, Montana have shifted from costing, 500,000 a year for a single family home to 1.5 to $2 million a year for a single family home in 5 years. How
Hmm.
does that shift things? And so for us, we were like, well, I live in San Francisco, and in San Francisco, they spent $14 billion to solve homelessness. It's very complex to solve this issue in big cities. Could we essentially, for our first collection, focus on these Zoom towns that are hurting right now when it comes to affordable housing? For instance, the city of Lake Tahoe is trying to build, real estate for their essential workers because they are priced out of Lake Tahoe because of
Hmm.
the of individuals who've moved to Lake Tahoe during the COVID pandemic.
Interesting.
And so we're looking at these cities and being like, hey, these are actually really great sample sizes for us to create a neighborhood cooperative. So again, translating Web 2 to Web 3, could we essentially look at co-ops and how buildings of co-ops work, but instead build it to scale for a neighborhood where individuals have a right to vote. And then through that, through our collection, they have their own treasury, and then they can delegate where the money goes based on bettering that neighborhood.
Hmm.
And with that being said, these Zoom towns also have an issue when it comes to retirement, because prior to the COVID pandemic, the median age for a lot of these Zoom towns was roughly, 55 to 65 years old.
Right, because people would move there to retire.
Exactly. And so as we're helping them build new industries, accelerating their kind of economic development, what does it look like to build a sustainable industry, knowing that a majority of the population is also retiring as well? And so knowing all those different variables in place, we realized that it was the best opportunity for us to test our idea was through the lens of Zoom towns.
Hmm.
So I know that I kind of went off tangent to kind of give you the complexity of Zoom towns, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of had that shared vocabulary as well.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Although as a digital nomad, I thought the concept of being a nomad was not actually staying in one place for very long, right? You'd move. I mean, that's the point of being a nomad. But you're saying that there's lots of digital nomads out there who don't really want to move. They just want to escape the high prices. They want to have more money in their pocket, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they want to escape the high prices. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Hmm.
There's an easier way, to pay for your food, your shelter, and also create a pathway to have a better kind of mental health environment. These nomads are moving there. And
Yeah.
we're seeing that on the average in terms of who we researched. And we've researched and spoke to roughly 300 digital nomads. they're staying there for about 6 months to a year. And
Hmm.
so they're not moving every month or so. They do want to build community, but they also want to make sure that they're making impact in their cities as well. And right now, if you kind of think about larger cities, when we think about the word gentrification, right, we often think about the word displacement as well.
Yep,
And so
absolutely.
for
Well, that's
us,
exactly what's happening.
exactly, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing in Mexico City, right? Where a lot of digital nomads who are staying there more than, a year because of the lower cost of living compared to, the local salary in Mexico. They're staying there. And then the landlords, because they see a new market, a new demographic of user that they can upcharge, are then increasing rent all over neighborhoods. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's different about us as well, is when we are going to these new neighborhoods in these Zoom towns, we are also making an agreement to small businesses and government officials and local residents that for our long-term housing, it will always be 30% of a hourly worker's full-time monthly income. And it will
Mm.
be more than that. So that we can have two things at the same time. One is we have affordable housing for essential workers who are providing the infrastructure and maintaining that infrastructure for cities, while also providing opportunities for digital nomads to enter these cities without feeling like these digital nomads are taking away housing.
Right.
Is often seen in larger cities.
So if I were a digital nomad today and I wanted to sign up for your service, how does that work? Are you taking people now, or is it still in the experimental phase, or where are you at right now?
So we're launching our collection in January of next year. It's going to be January 11th. I like
Well,
kind
that's
of,
really close.
yeah, it's very
Are you
close.
guys ready?
We're ready. We are very ready to launch our collection. And then when we sell out, we will be utilizing a majority of the profits that we make to build our first neighborhood. And
Hmm.
so we spent the past 6 months doing our own scouting and due diligence, and we found our first neighborhood. It's going to be in the Berkshires region of Massachusetts, where a lot of digital nomads are actually flocking to. The city that we're moving to has a population of 13,000. However, there's about 250,000 people who visit that city every year.
Hmm.
And it's because they have the largest contemporary art museum in North America. And so that's where we're building our first neighborhood. And then through that, we are going to build a sustainable flywheel to scale to 5 neighborhoods in 2 years.
Wow, fantastic. Are you going to be doing any in California, or is that out of the question for now?
It's we will eventually, because of the high cost of owning land and developing in California, and also because of the zoning laws in California, it'll probably be kind of more in regards to a phase 4
Right.
versus phase 1. Our goal right now is to focus on Zoom towns, and then over time potentially focus on in larger cities.
Have you had any kind of pushback against this model from anybody? From
Um,
governments or unions or anyone at all, like any groups who are like, that sounds okay, but it's not going to work.
Not in the Zoom towns. We
Mm.
did have a bit of pushback in larger cities, some of
Hmm.
these cities in California. And I think it's because there are misaligned incentives, right? For larger cities, there's also an established coalition that you have to deal with in
Right.
these large cities, where to be able to own, operate, and conduct property management for developments, you also need to work with certain providers that have been verified and have partnerships with the government.
Hmm.
Because of that, that can create some complexities. For example, kind of blowing out your entire budget in terms of
Yeah,
building a
that's not
project.
good.
Yeah, so we were we when we were a Web2 company, we actually were going to be building in a city in California, but then realized because of its current obstacles, it'll be better for us to build later on when we have more case studies, and that can help us kind of navigate some of the traditional um, uh, inefficiencies that are happening in the cities in California.
Hmm. So, do you see eventually bringing this model to bigger cities too, or is it going to stay in sort of peripheral and Zoom towns?
Our first collection is going to be focused in Zoom towns, and then our next collection is actually going to be more towards mid-sized cities and then also international cities as well.
Hmm.
So we are hoping to eventually impact 10,000 minimum wage workers and have at least 150 buildings and 50 neighborhoods to be able to accomplish that. But we really want to focus on the most needed demographic of cities that don't have a budget right now to solve affordable housing, which are these Zoom towns.
Right. And is there a particular kind of housing that you're building? I mean, is it size specifically, or I mean, what kind of housing are you going to be building?
Yeah, I can share the ratios. I mean, for us, a lot of our housing is going to be sustainable. A lot of our housing is going to be utilizing new technologies like prefab technologies. We are, very conscious in making sure that our buildings are aligned to the future of creating more sustainable cities when it comes to climate change. So that's really important for us. Our NFT artist is a climate scientist, and so it's really important that we're kind of aligned to the future of real estate and in the future of sustainability. From a business model point of view, just to kind of give you some real-time data, for a lot of luxury buildings, 15% of those buildings are designated towards affordable housing.
Mm.
For us, 70% of our buildings or units are going to be designated towards affordable housing, and 30% of them would be for short-term rentals.
Oh,
And the way
excellent.
that we are designing it is the short-term rentals are helping to sustain a lot of the affordable housing. So local residents kind of see it as an opportunity of bringing visitors in, but also an opportunity for them to continue to have affordable housing in neighborhoods. And then secondly, we're going to be buying blocks in a neighborhood. So the way that we're kind of focusing the urban planning of our neighborhoods is, one, they have to be in opportunity zones because opportunity zones are historically kind of based on the definition from the federal government of economically distressed neighborhoods that need to increase wealth and also need to increase jobs, which is
Hmm.
what our solution does. And then we're going to be buying blocks where most of our buildings are going to be distressed buildings, where we are going to be renovating those buildings and ensuring that 70% of the individuals living in those buildings are minimum wage workers in those cities.
So how would somebody apply for that? I mean, what are the criteria to be allowed into that low income housing? By the way, I love the concept because I know that some of this architecture that's out there, some of these distressed buildings are probably beautiful underneath. So some of the architecture must be amazing.
Oh yeah, they're beautiful. And if you're also thinking about a lot of the distressed Victorian homes, is they're actually some of the most sustainable homes because of
Hmm.
the kind of materials that they've used, in the late 1800s, 1900s, right? And so the way that we are kind of working in kind of having residents live in our long-term buildings is we're directly working with small businesses first because they feel the hurt the most.
Hmm.
A lot of small businesses don't have employees who can sustainably work in those businesses because of the cost of living.
Right.
Uh, kind of aligned to a lot of our researches, a lot of small businesses, their employees are commuting 45 minutes to 2 hours to get to work. And so if you're thinking
Terrible.
the cost, like think about the average, subway system and how much, a hourly worker makes. It's about a third of their daily income just to go to work and back,
Oh yeah,
right?
it's insane. And if you think about all the carbon dioxide in the air from people who drive, it's
Yeah,
it's it's
it's bad
terrible.
for the environment as
Yeah.
well. And so our kind of first phase of acquisition is to work with small businesses as an acquisition funnel for them to keep talent, but also to ensure that the talent is living in the cities so that we can help them with commuting to work, but also providing a financial safety net. And then we're going to be also working with local nonprofits as well, a lot of community organizers, because they are kind of on the ground, kind of working
Mm.
individuals every day when it comes to affordable housing. And then our third phase is kind of our own kind of landing page. And so as we have various neighborhoods, we are going to be working, with various publications. We're going to have our own online landing page for people to apply as a resident. What's really great about us is we're actually not going to be asking for any credit score, because that's also really important. If you think about affordable housing, the largest blocker for a lot of minimum wage workers is a credit score, which is the reason why a lot of individuals who are minimum wage workers are actually living in motels. I
Right.
think a good case study is Disney workers in Orlando. They are living in hotels right now, or motels.
Well, they have to. It's too expensive to live anywhere. It's
Yeah, it's
terrible.
expensive, and unfortunately, because of their income and how they have to max their credit cards, they do have a low credit score, which is the reason why Extended Stay America is a billion-dollar company,
Yep.
because they're able to, have most of their residents be low-income workers. And so our goal is to not ask for a credit, and just to verify employment to ensure that you are an hourly worker, and you are making close to the state hourly wage. And that's all the criteria that we're asking for. And of course, we're going to be doing a background check just to make sure that there aren't any, major issues when it comes to someone's criminal background. But
Right.
our goal is, for a lot of our hourly workers to really, lower the burden when it comes to screening, so that they can start to focus on building a financial safety net that will hopefully long-term translate to generational wealth.
Excellent. So are you imagining mostly one bed, one bath places, or will you also have like a variety of sizes as well?
For our first phase, it's going to be probably one bed, one bath. The reason being is the largest demographic that is being impacted when it comes to inaffordable housing are individuals. So when you think about a lot of policies in place, a lot of them are catered towards families.
hmm
And so for our first phase, we want to focus on individuals. And then as we pursue more neighborhoods, we'll probably create more of the mixed use, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom housing.
Are you doing anything innovative on the sort of design, like maybe making it modular or anything like that, or is it going to be sort of simple?
We're probably going to be very simple at first. We are going to be utilizing prefab housing, but it's going to be very simple prefab housing. It's going to be self-contained. But over time, we do want to make it more mass scale, and go from probably 30 units in our first neighborhood to potentially 200 by neighborhood 4 or 5. I think we're just going to be experimenting along the way, but be kind of relentless in our vision, which is to reimagine affordable housing in cities.
Right. So is it going to be more not tiny homes, but it'll be more like buildings, like an apartment building
Yeah, it'll be
sort of thing?
built.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. This is fantastic. I've always wondered, have we figured out how much space a typical human being needs to survive in?
I don't know the answer to that, but my best kind of first route of thinking is actually to go to an IKEA. Uh, because if you go to an
Yeah, you're
IKEA,
right, because they have those tiny little like 200 square foot
exactly,
apartments or something like that.
and then you can look at it and you're like, oh wow, I could actually live in a 200 square foot apartment
Yeah.
that has
Yeah.
everything I need.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, here when you look at it globally, there's people living in tiny little shacks and there's people living in 4,000, 6,000 square foot homes. So really the typical human being doesn't really need all that much space.
mhm.
And I think we're in a situation now where we there's a disconnect between the amount of space a person needs and sort of like the minimum size of a living unit in a city. So if we line those up, then maybe we'd be able to build more affordable housing in some of these big cities.
Exactly. Because there's different trade-offs when you live in a big city versus, in a smaller town, right? In a big city, I used to live in New York City, you have everything outside of your window.
Yeah.
And you rarely cook. I mean, I rarely cooked when I was living in New York. And it makes it very easy to live in a 200 square foot apartment because like you would spend most of your time outside, right?
Right.
But if you live in a smaller town where you are doing a lot of your farming or you're doing a lot of your cooking all in your home, that could potentially create a different variable in terms of the amount of space you would need to live.
Hmm. So you mentioned earlier that you were talking about the future of cities. So let's do the think like a futurist a little bit early. So it's 2032. Where do you see cities being in 10 years? I mean, do you think they'll be able to solve some of the major problems that they have today? Because it seems like it's getting worse instead of getting better.
Yeah, and I think if we don't reimagine cities, I'll probably continue that trajectory.
Right.
Just to kind of put my futurist hat right now, I think there's um, three key variables that are going to be impacting the outcome of cities in 2030. One is we are in kind of, a tech fall right now, right?
Mm,
Where hundreds of thousands of workers have been let go from multiple tech companies. And that's not the big issue. The big
hmm.
issue is they're getting severance packages or they're utilizing this as a decision making platform to leave cities. And
Right.
so what's happening is some of the highest earners in cities are now leaving cities. And how does that change the landscape in terms of how cities are maintained, knowing that some of the policies that are being built for cities are based on kind of the high growth of workers that are in these tech companies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. They
that
just expect it to just keep going up, and
it's
it's
plummeted,
not.
right? And so
Yeah.
if you have a lot of your high earners leave, how does that impact the indirect effects of small businesses, of restaurants, coffee shops, etc., who have utilized the income from those high earners with a lot of flexibility to maintain their businesses? And so
Right.
I think for a lot of cities, again thinking like a futurist, a lot of the mental model is built on high acquisition, high growth, but not necessarily sustainability. And so
Hmm.
we don't find an out of the box solution for cities. A lot of high earners are going to leave. And what we're seeing right now is they're leaving to form their own cities. I
Right.
have friends who've actually moved to Zoom towns because they could buy not just a house, but an entire building in downtown and reimagine a city. And they're asking 50 of their friends to move with them in those cities. And so
Wow. I
when
didn't know that was happening. That's
that's,
cool.
yeah, it's cool. I'm also just a personal side note. I go to Burning Man, and what I love about Burning Man is like the reimagine of cities. And so just
Hmm.
this in the real world is really interesting. But there's also a trade-off, a unique trade-off is one, people are no longer having the need to commute to work, right? I mean, there's definitely a lot of change management changes right now. I just read on the news that Snap is making it mandatory for their workers to go to work 4 days a week,
Oh
starting from,
man, really?
we'll see
We're
how
going
that
backwards. We're going backwards.
I know we'll see how it impacts their retention. But like traditional cities were built on the commuter culture. I mean, that's how
Oh
suburbs
yeah.
were created. And now you don't have to commute to work. So how does that impact cities as a whole? And now that these high earners are leaving, how does that create additional impact? So unless we can find new solutions where we can maintain cities, we can help essential workers and low income workers stay in cities without the high growth returns in working with these high earners, a lot of cities unfortunately will crumble. And so that's why we've created Neighbor, is to really build a new solution where everyone can win versus a certain individual being incentivized.
Yeah. What's interesting is that you mentioned earlier about property taxes, right? So the reason why like most cities survive on property taxes, but isn't that incorrect? That they should be doing it that way? Because if you think about it, I mean, first of all, market value assessments that have to do with market value are totally out of whack, right?
Mhm.
Because just because my home is worth $1 million doesn't mean I spend that much money in. If there's only two people living in that home, then the amount of services I consume are much lower than the value that you're pulling in. And I know it evens out, but aren't there more efficient and effective ways of being able to pay for a city than property taxes?
Oh yeah, there's definitely more ways. And what's really unique about The US is there are other countries where individuals don't pay for property tax unless they own a second home.
Oh,
And
that's oh, I want to see that.
yeah. For the United States, it's our first home where we own property tax, right? And
Yeah.
I it's kind of like the horse and carriage model. It's a model that continuously works. And what we've also seen is a real estate boom, right? Real estate is one of the key ways for local governments to get recurring revenue.
Yep.
But what we're seeing is because of the high cost of living, there are new co-living kind of models. Common is a good model where you can move to any city but not have to pay property tax, and it's a membership model which
hmm
allows you to move to any city where Common is, right? And what we're
I love
seeing,
that model. In fact, I wouldn't mind utilizing that model. I mean, is it
it's a
difficult
great
to get
model. I used
into?
to live in the Common.
Have you ever tried it?
Yeah, I used to live in the Common.
Oh
I lived
yeah.
in New York, and then I wanted to move to the West Coast, and so I just transferred my membership from living in Brooklyn, New York, to Oakland, California. And it was
Oh,
very easy.
nice.
I sent them an email and was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving to the West Coast," and they're like, "Okay, we'll transfer your membership."
I love it. Do they have a lot of locations? Are they expanding? Are they doing well?
Yeah, they're doing really well. I think they have over 25 locations in the US right now.
See, if you ask me, that's sort of like the future things, especially because if most people are digital nomads, then the ability to just move from one place to another seamlessly is, I think it's worth a lot.
Oh yeah, and it also revamps the idea of what does it mean to own, right?
Mm,
If you think about, and let's use the example again of, I have purchased a $1.5 million house in LA, right? That means that my annual property tax is roughly $24,000 a year.
geez.
And that means what I'm paying roughly $2,000 a month for property tax, and $2,300 a month in LA is a one bedroom apartment.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
not only have I spent $1.5 million, but the property tax itself is the cost of rent in the city that I live. And I probably could live in a nicer neighborhood because
Yeah,
let's be honest, a $1.5 million house in LA is probably not in the best neighborhood in Los Angeles, unfortunately.
exactly.
And this gives me, the ability of, yeah, having an asset that I own for X amount of years, but also giving X amount of money back to the government. And so what's interesting about a co-living model is I have the flexibility. And then if we add Web3 to it and saying, oh, what if I'm a creator and I'm on the marketing team at Common? Wouldn't it be really cool for me to use my 1.5 million followers to help them learn about Common? And every single time someone signs up, I can get X amount of rewards, which would give me X amount money off on my monthly subscription at Common.
Oh,
Right?
fantastic.
That
I love
creates
that.
a flywheel model, right? For people to get acquired and also for people to be retained. And I think
hmm
that's what's really unique about Web3 is we are kind of rethinking membership to be outside of the traditional hard goods and hard assets that we see today. I think it's kind of that next step of fractional ownership. Where we can own a piece of real estate without the liability of owning it.
Yeah, I think that's got to be where we go because of the high prices, first of all, but then just to be able to share that ownership and be able to support it, that's great. So where do you see? So thinking about the future again, what has to happen in these larger cities to get them moving again, to get them back on the incline?
Yeah, and I think, what needs to happen is cities need to start building an infrastructure that is focused on long-term sustainability.
Mm,
They've relied on, growth for so long. They've relied on building new suburbs to pay off a lot of land costs in the downtowns of their cities for so long. And there needs to be models in place that can focus on sustainability. I think, one good way of doing that, I mean, I think California was on track was their policy on ADUs, right?
hmm
That Governor Newsom had during the pandemic, which is, hey, we know that we have low supply on land, but we also know that there's landowners that have backyards. Could we give a $40,000 grant to allow individuals to build ADUs and rent out those ADUs? Could that solve, housing? And I think what cities need to do is kind of look at kind of their own business model and saying, if we are kind of thinking about kind of the North Star of what we want to create, which is a sustainable city that's not focused on debt. Like, how can we do that? And who are the new kind of stakeholders that are needed, that we need to collaborate to ensure that we're building this new prosperous city? And how can we also incentivize essential workers who are in part of our narrative of building long-term sustainability to start living in these cities? Because the more that we can provide opportunity for middle-aged workers, essential workers to live in cities, the more opportunity that they have to innovate and maintain these cities. And I think for a lot of cities, they've been focused a lot of their time and energy and money into transitional workers, or workers who don't want to live in these cities, or workers who are only living in these cities because of their job.
Yes, the old commute model, like you were saying.
Exactly. And because of that, a lot of cities and their communities have been displaced. And if we think about a lot of these essential workers, they're here because of the communities that they've built, right?
Yep.
And how could we help those individuals help to maintain these communities? And then through that, it will create a more kind of lucrative environment for more people to move in.
Yeah, but it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because you've got Newsom, you got the governor promoting ADUs, but then you have individual cities putting so many restrictions on where the ADUs can be. Is that, I mean, I wanted to build one, but I can't because of all the restrictions that San Jose has. So a few blocks away from here in Campbell, there's people building ADUs that they can, but I can't because of San Jose. So it's almost like all these cities need to get aligned and go, this is a statewide problem. We all need to make allowances for this sort of thing instead of protecting our own turf.
Exactly. Or each city needs to create a DAO. And then in a DAO, every citizen can propose an idea. So Chris, you can propose the idea in terms of ADU. And then every citizen has the ability of voting, and then through a consent decision framework, move forward and saying, hey, the city of San Jose, we're going to allocate $2 million for ADUs. And, who wants to build them in their backyard? Great. And then, after, 5 years, pay us back the construction cost for the ADU.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think, do you think we'll see a lot more DAOs in the next 10 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years on the DAO on Web3? Will people stop saying Web3 is like BS?
Well, I think
there's lots of people out there who don't believe in it. They think it's like, oh, this is just like, fairy dust or unicorns or whatever.
What's really interesting is I was actually looking at newspaper clippings from 1993, where the same exact narrative that they're saying about Web3 is the same narrative that they said about the internet in 1993.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm not too.
There's always the naysayers, right?
Exactly. And would you have rather been a yay-sayer in 1993 or 1999 when Amazon first came to existence and put $100 into Amazon stock in 1999, or wait until now, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of understanding where we are in terms of the exponential curve. And I think where we are in right now is, in order for Web3 to become mass adopted, we have to focus on onboarding. We have to adopt and onboard the next billion users into Web3. And if individuals can understand that, Web3 is a way of reimagining ownership, where 1,000 people can change the lives of 1 million people by having a focused vision, that will then incentivize individuals to join Web3. Because I think what we're kind of seeing right now is an explosion of human problems that haven't been solved through technology. And I think it's because technology hasn't had the layer of human coordination, which is what Web3 creates. It creates human coordination with technology, and also allows kind of blockchain and AI to kind of work together to really understand patterns to disrupt blockers that are impacting human coordination.
I love it.
And I think that's where, DAOs will be in the future, where we're going to be out of the kind of Gartner hype cycle. We're not going to be in disillusion anymore. We've had, test cases, hopefully Neighbor is one of them. And kind of through that, people will understand the unique differentiator that they can make in their communities so that they are accountable and they are empowered to create the world that they want to create. And I think that's what will happen with DAOs in the next 10 years.
So if I want to join Web3, where do I go? Do I go to Neighbor? Do I go to your site and join there? Or what's the best way for me to get involved?
I think the best way is twofold. One is to first understand, your identity as a whole. Like when I think about Web3, it's also understanding kind of who you are and what problems you want to solve. So if you are a person who lives in the city, or a person that cares about solving affordable housing, or want to create belonging and inclusion in neighborhoods, join Neighbor. It's BeMyNeighbor.io. Another way of kind of learning
BeMyNeighbor.io.
Yeah, BeMyNeighbor.io.
Is that like from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
He's one of my biggest influencers, Mr. Rogers. The second option is I'm a part of Randy Zuckerberg's Hug Accelerator.
Hug Accelerator. How do you accelerate hugs? That's a new one.
Yeah, so what's really great about Hugs is they're creating the inclusiverse in Web3. And so they're really
nice.
Inclusive environment. Hugs is a really great way to kind of learn about Web3 in general. Curious Abbeys is one of the companies that are also a part of the Hugs community, and their goal is to accelerate knowledge in Web3. And so that is a really great place just to learn about Web3. But before joining a community, just really understand like where you want to impact and shape things in the worlds that you care about. I think that's what really makes like Web3 really unique, is it's creating identities that translate into ownership. And so if you really want to kind of own a vision, join that community. And then through kind of the collective compounding of network effects, you can really establish change.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I'll put all the links in the show notes. And is there any other way, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way? The
best way is use Twitter. I know Twitter is a lot of things right now. I'm also on Farcaster if you want as well. You can message our project, Be My Neighbor, or you can Farcast me at Charmaine, and we can chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.